sound.
Phil Butler interview take 2.
Okay, got that.
Okay, let me double check the framing. Looks good. And back to where we were.
Coming through the trees.
So you were just talking about coming through the trees.
Yeah, I actually came down through the trees, and the trees caught my chute and risers, and once again, I owe my life to the ejection seat system, but also the parachute that worked and going through the trees. Because if I hadn't gone through those trees, I'm sure probably the impact of the ground might have killed me or crippled me so badly that I maybe would have met my demise in one form or another. But anyway, I kept sitting there on the ground, hearing all the noise around me. My first inclination was, of course, to get the hell out of there. So I took my helmet off and threw my helmet down and took my G-suit off and threw it off to one side because I wanted to get more into a mode to be able to run and get out of there. And I took the large belt system that I had around me that was in the seat pan that I had still hanging off my rear end. I took all that apart and got the survival stuff out of it and put it in the little packets that I had around my belt. And then I got out a flashlight that I had in my G-suit, and I got an ONC map, which was something that I had in my pants, and that's the only map system that I had, but I pretty much knew where I was and where I had to go, and my mind was to get from there to Laos, which was a pretty good distance, but nevertheless, I figured that's what I had to do, so that's what I started off to do.
And let me just ask you, sir, you had the option to go toward the sea or toward Laos, which I think is west, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you choose, obviously the sea coast was a lot closer, but what determined that decision making?
Well, it was just from my briefing that to get to Laos in order to be rescued, because we couldn't be rescued by rescue helicopter if we went to the coast north of Vinh. So there was no way to rescue us unless I got to Laos or close to Laos. And one of the other things I remember I had this little PRK-2 radio thing, your emergency radio. So with all this stuff, off I went, storming into the jungle, and I remember that I was thrashing around and I was really a lot of adrenaline going. I was trying to get through all of this heavy brush, and all this stuff kept grabbing a hold of me. It was just full of, all sorts of little pointed stickers and stuff in this heavy, heavy undergrowth and brush that I was trying to get through. And I remember working at this with my little direction finder and my flashlight, and I was trying to get through this brush, and I must have worked at this for close to an hour, and sweat was pouring off of me, and it was warm there anyway. Of course, it was like midnight, but there was moonlight, and I could see where I was around me. So at that point, I just recall that I desperately had to go to the bathroom and relieve myself. So I stopped, pulled my shorts down, my pants and shorts down, and took an enormous crap. And, it's just like the fear and everything and the adrenaline running through me was making all my systems were in overload. But at that point, I kind of got my head screwed on straight, and I realized that I was not going to go anywhere trying to battle through the underbrush. So I retraced my steps and realized that in an hour I had gone probably 30 or 40 feet. I retraced my steps back to where I had originally went down, and I saw a pathway, probably a pathway that animals had used or people had used, or maybe people with water buffaloes or whatever I had used. So I started going on this pathway that was going roughly south and west, and that's when I really began to start my escape. And I recall getting onto this pathway and starting to trot. And I got into sort of a dog trot, a rhythm and a dog trot. And with all the adrenaline that was in me, I'm sure I went maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 miles, 6 miles. I have no idea, but I went until it was almost daylight that first night, and before I stopped.
And talk to me about finding that first night's shelter.
Well, I found a stream, and I had some little red pills that were supposed to sanitize water, and I was able to get some water and put the pills in it and drink the water out of the stream, which was undoubtedly polluted. And I realized that it was about to start daylight because I was starting to see light, on the horizon. So I found a place in some brush that was near the stream, the little stream. I would say this stream was maybe 15 or 20 feet wide, something like that, and shallow. But I found a place in the brush that was near the stream, and I sort of crawled back up into the brush with my feet angled towards the little stream. And actually, I think, in my memory now, I think what I'm saying is, I think I'm talking about my second night. So let me reverse back. I think the first night, as I recall, now it's a long time ago, 50 years ago, but I think on the first night, I found a place on a hill in some brush, because I remember waking up in the morning and hearing radio speakers chanting around the country. And I remember looking out from this vantage point and seeing a very small village below me. But I heard this radio, and there was this like methodical chanting that I later came to understand that on the radio it was going, Mode, Hi, Ba, Bone, Mode, Hi, Ba, Bone. In Vietnamese, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what happened in North Vietnam at daybreak, 6 o'clock in the morning, or whatever the time daybreak was, that the radio speakers went on everywhere in the country telling people to get up and exercise. So they're doing their Tai Chi exercises out there to 1, 2, 3, 4, which I thought that's really amazing. You got an entire nation, everybody exercising at the same time. I sort of began to realize that these guys were pretty organized. Maybe I was in a lot of trouble here. So that was actually the first night. As soon as when it got dark, I started finding pathways again and running down pathways until I got to the stream that I mentioned here. Hid in the stream and went to sleep. At this point, I was just completely exhausted, absolutely exhausted from the effort of 2 days of running around out there in the jungle. And I think at this point I may have gotten 15 or 20 miles, because I had really, made some distance in an effort to evade capture. And I knew I had to get out of there and evade capture. Also, I had tried with my little PRC-2 radio on numerous occasions to call, and I kept calling, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Beefeater 225, down pilot, Philip Butler, Navy pilot, Phil Butler. Do you read me? Does anybody read me? Over. And I kept sending this call out, on the little radio, and never got anything back, just crackling, never got anything back on it. So anyway, the second morning, I'm sound asleep in this brush, and it might have been like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, but I woke up to the sound of Vietnamese voices. And I thought, oh boy, this is trouble. So I had my hand near my survival pistol. I had a German Luger pistol that was my own private pistol and not the 38 that the Navy gave us. And I had 9mm shells in a belt and also loaded into the pistol. So anyway, I keep hearing the voices, and as I was lying there, I remember looking out and seeing two men in the stream, and they had big bamboo poles and they were swatting the water as they came up or down the stream. I don't know which it was. But I realized that they were catching fish. They were hitting fish in the little stream, and that they weren't after me. But as I lay there, I had this, suddenly, for some reason, I had this feeling that I was being watched. I don't know what caused this to happen in my mind, but I remember, without moving my head, because I was trying to remain rock still, I remember just looking around with my eyes, and there, right next to my head, was the head of a king cobra. And I froze, and I froze not through, I think, looking back on it, not through any sense of discipline or anything, but out of just stark fear. I mean, this guy was sitting there next to my face, and his hood opened up next to my head, and his tongue was darting out. And I had grown up in Oklahoma around snakes, rattlesnakes, caught water moccasins, copperheads, and different kinds of snakes that we used to even catch as a kid. And I realized that the tongue was coming out because that's how they sense the air to see what it is. So he was trying to figure out, am I friend or foe? Am I prey or what am I? So at any rate, for some reason, he decided, I guess, in his little snake mind that I wasn't a foe, nor was I food. So he folded his hood in, and he went down next to my body, and he went out towards the stream. And I remember as I lay there, I watched his head go by my feet before about another foot or two went past my head. So I figured this guy, this cobra, was probably 15 feet long anyway. And of course, as I remember, the size of him, maybe he was 100 feet long and 10 feet in diameter, but anyway, looking at it reasonably. So off he went towards the stream. And by another good fortune, the two guys that were fishing in the stream saw the cobra, and they started screaming and yelling at each other, and they ran after the cobra, and the cobra took off, and they took off after the cobra. I guess they wanted to catch it for food or kill it or whatever. So the cobra went away, and the guys went away, and I just lay there for the rest of the day in a torpor of some sort. But when it got dark again, having grown up in Oklahoma around snakes, you know, you always had a snake stick when you were wandering around the brush in Oklahoma where there were rattlesnakes. You know, it was a fork snake. You'll get yourself a little fork stick, you know, to put on a steak. So I remember taking out my survival knife and cutting off a branch that was about the size of my wrist with a fork that was probably a foot wide. What I actually had was probably an elephant stick and not a fork stick, but anyway, I had that with me, and I was carrying it to help me keep my balance, and it was nighttime, and I took off running again for the start of the third night.
And then eventually, it wasn't, you evaded capture for 4 nights, and on the fourth night, or fourth day, I believe, you were undone by not human intervention, but of another guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on the third night, I had an incident happen. I was crawling through the brush, and there was a line of little hooches, a little small, you know, farming group of people, and I could hear people snoring and stuff, and dogs were barking, and I know I didn't worry about the dogs barking because dogs bark all the time. Anyway, they're worthless when it comes to actually warning about burglars or anything because they constantly bark any sound at all. And I crawled through the brush, and as I crawled through all of a sudden this gigantic thing stood up in front of me and went, and I had bumped into a water buffalo. Yeah, what an experience. Oh my God, I tell you. One damn thing after another on this venture. So I made a circle around the water buffalo and went on and found a place to sleep and rest through the next day. And then the next night I started off again. And this time I came to a large river where I was able to cross on a levee, and it was starting to get light again. And I found a place to hide in a grove of trees. It was this grove of trees that was probably, I don't know, maybe 75 or 100 feet in diameter. And there was this little pathway leading in, and I went into the pathway, and I found a place there in the center that was cleared out, and it looked like people had been there before and had made a fire, maybe for cooking food or something. So anyway, I was exhausted, and that's where I made my bed to sleep. But a couple hours later, I heard the sound of airplanes. So I got my radio out, and I looked up, and it was a flight of 4 Air Force F-105s. And they were making a circle around, and they were attacking. I guess on that river, maybe there had been boats or something, or people that they were attacking, and they had the 105s had the Gatling guns on them that were really powerful. So the first guy rolled in and, with the Gatling guns, and explosions were going off maybe 50 feet away from me. So I got on my little PRC radio and I said, "Mayday, mayday, mayday, this is Beefeater 225, down Navy pilot. I'm in the grove of trees right below me. You fly to 4 F-105s. Do you read me? Over." And so they got up and they started circling around. And I said, "If you read me, give me a burner light." And these guys started hitting burners, going bam, 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 as they went around, bam. I said, "I'm right in this grove of trees. Do you see me?" Bam, bam, for yes, because I couldn't hear them. They were trying to call me on guard, but the radio wasn't working well enough to get a call back. So anyway, they finished, circling around, and they joined up with each other, and they came by over the top of me, and the guy that was in the lead moved out, and he gave me a little wing rock like that as they departed off. And I was just thinking, boy, I wish I had a big long rope that I could hook up to those guys and go off with them, and away they went. So anyway, that was the last of my escapades out there in evasion, because in the next hour or so, I wind up getting captured.
And just briefly, if you could describe that capture.
Well, I had my 9mm Luger, and I was sleeping in the center, and I began of that grove of trees, and I began to hear voices, and this time it sounded like a crowd of people. Chatter, 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 chattering, and this time I knew that the jig was up, that they were not just off doing something on their own. They were after me. They had tracked me, and they were after me. And so I might say that, remembering, as I did throughout my evasion of 4 days and nights, about the dogs, having grown up with dogs and hunted with dogs as a kid in Oklahoma. Uh, I used evasion techniques that foiled dogs. I would get into a river or a stream, and I would go up the stream 100 yards, out the other side, and make tracks, and then come back into the stream, go back to where I had originally been, then go down another 100 yards, and then go out there. So I did that probably 3 or 4 times. And it turns out they did have dogs, and it probably kept them off my trail for a while. So anyway, I began to hear these voices, so I got into a kneeling position, and I unholstered my 9mm, and I put a round in the chamber, and I pointed it down the pathway in the direction that the voices were coming. In the pathway I came in, I knew they had to come in. And I remember actually saying out loud to myself in this situation, I said, "This is it, Phil. You've got to shoot your way out of here." I said that to myself out loud, very weird. So anyway, as I'm sitting there with the gun out and I hear the voices start down the pathway, but all of a sudden this gray shape came out of the brush from the left, through the air, grabbed my wrist, tore my arm off to the ground. My pistol went flying out of my hand, and it was a German Shepherd dog. And I remember that having had German Shepherds before myself, I owned a German Shepherd when I was shot down. This dog must have been a female because she was probably maybe 50 pounds or 60 pounds. But boy, I'll never forget the power of her jaws. Wow. Just so powerful. The pain from that was incredible. I remember reaching over to grab the dog by the scruff. She had held on to my wrist when another dog came running down the pathway and grabbed my other wrist, and these dogs together pinned me to the ground in such a fashion as this, and they were incredibly well trained. The people came down the pathway, and in the lead of the people was a North Vietnamese, probably second lieutenant, and he had an AK-47, and he got 10 feet away, and he stopped, and everybody stopped, and I remember seeing him and all the people stop and looking at me, and he got his AK-47, and he opened fire, and from 10 feet away, he missed me. So I just figured that maybe that was the first time he had ever fired that weapon. It almost went out of his hands when he fired it. I think he lost a grip on it. But it's hard to imagine that anybody survives an AK from 10 feet, but I guess it happens in combat. But he missed me from 10 feet away. The people were not impressed. They grabbed him and threw him aside and came over the top of me. It was just crazy from that point. I remember they were stripping everything off of me and taking everything. I had a watch on, they took that. They took my shoes off. I was barefooted, and I wound up being in my underwear and t-shirt and barefooted, and they tied me up with ropes with my arms behind my back and went leading me off to a village.
A little historic perspective, sir. You were the 7th pilot in North Vietnam shot down, were you not?
I was,
If you could say that in your own words, because my voice won't be part of it.
right. I was, turns out I was the 7th pilot shot down, or went down, if you would say, over North Vietnam. So I always thought of myself as lucky number 7, with Everett Alvarez being the first. And lucky 7 survived, and so did the first. So did Everett.
And so were you aware, you were aware as you flew out that Albie he had been there for what, 6 months?
I was actually not aware of any other POWs. I just vaguely knew that they had said that there were some other people captured, but I probably didn't pay any attention to it or wasn't really aware of it.
Were you first taken to Hello? Where were you?
I was first taken to a prison in Van City, and I was there for 2 days. And they tried to interrogate me there, but the interrogator, it turns out, only spoke French. And there was a young man that they were trying to use to interpret for me, and he spoke Russian. I didn't speak Russian.
Sorry, sir, I'm gonna ask you to just pause for one moment. Someone's wheeling in their trash can. I don't wanna ruin what you're saying.
I hear the truck too.
Yeah, it's the second round. My nightmare.
Okay, should we pause and take a little bit of a break then? Let me
Yes,
raise
we
this
should.
microphone up, sir, so you can,
We can put that in your pocket too.
let's go ahead and cut.
If you wanna use
Okay,
the
you have to
bathroom,
keep
you
the
can put
audio
that in your
first.
pocket.
Okay. Thanks.